Hi, everybody. Welcome to Deep Six, the Deep State. There's been a very interesting development earlier today. Dana Rohrabacher, who is a congressman from California, who's a total scuzz. He's the only basically pro-Putin congressman in the House, went to London and went to the Ecuadorian embassy and interviewed Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks, who I consider to be a pretty good guy in exposing hypocrisy and pushing for truth in journalism. And Rohrabacher interviewed Assange, and Assange said flatly what he has said before and again, but he affirmed it now, which is the most recent affirmation after a year or so of silence, that Russia had nothing whatever to do with hacking the democratic computers. Nothing whatever to do. The DNC responded, "We'd rather take the word of our intelligence community than of Putin's favorite congressman," is the way they put it. But apart from that, in-your-face cutie reply, the fact is that now the slightest justification for this stupid charge of collusion is completely gone. The U.S. intel agencies, it looks like, either missed, which is unlikely, or lied to us, which is quite likely, about whether Russia was behind the hack of the Democratic Party computers. Because that was the one overt act that they were able to point to indicate that there was any Russian attempt to elect Donald Trump. Now, of course, that hack of their computers had nothing to do with the outcome of the election, nothing at all. It was done on the opening day of the Democratic Convention in July of 2016, which was 2 days after the close of Trump's convention. They were right back to back. And in the polling tracking, the night before the hack came out, Trump was 5 ahead. And the night after the Democratic Convention recessed 4 days later, Hillary was 11 ahead. So the hack can't possibly have done her any damage. Now, it is true, it ruffled feathers within the Democratic Party. It led to Debbie Wasserman Schultz's resignation. It stacked the bitterness between the establishment of the Democratic Party and the Bernie Sanders wing of it. All of that is true. But all the Bernie Sanders people fell in line and supported Hillary. There was no significant defection going into the election. I hoped for some, but there wasn't any. And this whole thing was a charade. And to blame all of this on Russia is just wrong. Julian Assange, who is the one person in a position to know it, because you know how WikiLeaks works. A private person who may be anonymous posts something on the website, and Julian Assange posts it on his, which everybody visits, and all of a sudden it goes all over the world. And that's how those hacks were unearthed. And he would know, he's the only person that could definitively know where that information came from. Now, when it was clear that Trump was going to win the election, the Obama people moved to get their operatives in the CIA and the FBI to leak reports of this collusion between Trump and Putin, the illusion of collusion. And they then, the leaders of this effort that I call In Rogue Spooks, which, by the way, is soaring to the top of the charts, and I urge you to get your copy today so you can help us build momentum. Just click on the link adjacent to this video and buy one. It was clear that the first thing these coup leaders did was to take out anybody that could oppose the coup. And one guy, of course, was Mike Flynn, who had been appointed NSA advisor by President Trump. And he had a history of upending the intelligence establishment. He had first gone to work heading intelligence in Afghanistan, and he said, "Hey, you guys get out from behind your desks. Get out in the country and figure out what's going on. And look which of the provinces that are likely to swing over to the Taliban and help us ID them and set in motion programs to stop that. And he was so, he fired a lot of people. Then he went up to become director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA, and he said, you guys also need to get out in the field and get out from behind your desks. And I want more information about trends shaping up around the world. And he fired a lot of people, and he was even less popular there. And when Trump appointed him to the top position, everybody groaned, and they said, oh my God, he's going to clean house. He's going to come down on us like a ton of bricks. And of course, what happened is that he was then fired. And he was fired because of this cockamamie thing that he had spoken to the Russian ambassador about sanctions, something that was wrong because he was 20 days before taking office. And if he'd done it in 21 days, it would have been perfectly fine for the National Security Advisor to speak to the Russian ambassador. In fact, it was pretty much required. So he was out. And of course, you know, Jeff Sessions got kicked out on similar charges. And now they're going after the third leg of that stool, Steve Bannon. Steve is really the only guy in the White House, Steve Miller too, sort of, but mainly Bannon, who is really standing up for the Trump agenda. He helped formulate it. He took Donald's instincts and reaction about America being undercut, not being permitted to be great again, and he morphed that into a political ideology, nationalist economics, really, and sold it to Trump and to the country, and it's kindled this whole movement throughout the land. Now what they're trying to do is to use this totally phony alt-right issue, the rhubarb and furor about the toppling of the statues and the claim that Donald Trump didn't oppose it strongly enough, to oust Bannon. Why? Because of his links to the alt-right community. What are those links? He was the editor of Breitbart newspaper, and the newspaper covered right-wing stuff as part of the news. Didn't approve of it, didn't endorse it editorially, just covered it. And that is somehow an act of heresy for the establishment media. So this is all a setup. This is all an effort to get rid of Bannon. In fact, it is not too far a stretch to say that they may have ginned up this whole controversy about toppling Confederate monuments in order to provoke an alt-right reaction, in order to embarrass Bannon, in order to get him out of there. That's just the kind of play that these guys formulate and think up. And they're desperate to get Bannon out of there because he's the only real Trumper left in the White House other than the president, in much the same way that they were desperate to get rid of me because I was the only moderate in Clinton's White House other than the president. And you get into a situation where the whole staff is against you because they're moving in the direction the president used to go in, but don't want to be in the change that he wants me to do, or in this case, Bannon to do. Now, let's just talk a little bit about this whole controversy. It is absurd to be giving it the kind of coverage that it has. Online, when you go to the New York Times and you click on politics, here are the articles. Republicans in Congress may be stuck in a relationship with Trump. James Corden jabs Trump for disbanding his business councils. Walmart CEO has plenty to say about Trump, and so do his customers. CEOs long avoided politics, but Trump is changing the calculus. Trump's embrace of racially charged past puts Republicans in crisis. Trump's lawyer forwards email echoing successionist rhetoric. A Fox News host attacks Trump, and some viewers bristle. That's all. There wasn't anything in between that. That was the news of the day. And they're doing everything they can to hype this controversy and make it into World War III. Now, I've said this yesterday and the day before, but let me repeat it in this context. There is nothing urgent about toppling the statue of a Confederate general or a Confederate leader. And once you go around toppling statues and erasing history and pretending that it didn't exist, whiting it out, that's what the communists do. They completely alter history to suit their own version of history. And I don't think that it's important that those statues stay up or that they get taken down, but I believe the decision to take them down was made knowing that it would provoke a reaction from the extreme racist morons in the extreme right of the Republican Party, the Nazis, the skinheads. They were trying to provoke those folks so that they could get blacks and Jews and others to rally around the liberal standard and turn against Trump. And when Trump spoke about there being damage on both sides and that this is outrageous to try to completely redo history, I think he was making a good point. What are we going to do? Take down Thomas Jefferson because he had slaves? Or George Washington because he had slaves? 7 of our first 14 presidents were slave owners. Are we going to erase their history completely? This is an effort that can go so far that it completely changes our whole history. There's a movement, I think, to change the name of something that's named after Washington, to get rid of it because of that. And this is just absurd. Are we going to demolish the Jefferson Memorial? Are we going to demolish the Washington Monument because they were slave owners? This can be carried to such an extreme, and it's an emotional issue. It accomplishes nothing. It won't help a single person get a job or an education or decent health care. It's just made to roil the political body to mobilize sentiment on behalf of the Obama administration people and the left of the Democratic Party against Trump, and to incite the Ku Klux Klan and those crazy people to riot and to go crazy so that they can drive people into the arms of the Democratic Party.
Dick, do you think that radical Muslims have anything to do with spurring it on civil unrest between the two factions, Antifa and the alt-right? Cheryl Gignat-Colera asks.
Cheryl Gignat-Colera asks, is there an effort by the radical Muslims to enhance this polarization? I don't think so. I think this isn't their deal. I think that, and I don't think they're that sophisticated in American politics. This one, my bet is, comes directly from Barack Obama, Valerie Jarrett, and Michelle Obama. They know how to play that race card like a fiddle, and I think that they feel that it's important to turn on and turn up the temperature under that, and that this is the best way to do it. Now, there is new evidence. First of all, let me just comment on the heartbreaking situation in Barcelona. I don't know if you've ever been to Barcelona, but it is the most gorgeous, wonderful, terrific city. Yeah, we're getting a glare from that.
Yes.
Thanks. And it's just amazingly beautiful. And it's heartbreaking to see this violence emerge there. It does, however, remind us that while we're fooling around with this stupid issue of a statue being taken down, there are real terrorists killing real and innocent people in the world, and that they need to be stopped, and that we can't sabotage the president who is trying to stop them. That's perfect. She can't make me look any better, but she can deal with the lighting.
You're cute.
And so this is a great reminder of the tasks and challenges we have before us. Now, there is new evidence coming out about the firing of Mueller's chief investigator. He wasn't fired, he was reassigned. This guy who used to be in charge of counter-espionage for the entire FBI now is doing the dishes and taking out the laundry. He's in human relations and not given any role in any investigation. What could he possibly have done to have caused that? And I believe the most likely thing is that he was behind the leak. We have something on the screen now. Oh. That he was behind the leak that possibly of the Manafort search that got out and that I think embarrassed Mueller. Mueller, I think, is increasingly understanding that the leaks could undo him. And my recommendation for a special prosecutor to investigate the leaks may be gaining traction. And they may have hung this guy, Peter Strzok, out to dry so that they could point to him and say, see, we're working on investigating leakers and we're dealing with them harshly. But I think that this is all part of the same ball of wax. Now, just the other day, I appeared on the radio show of George Norrie, Noorey, who hosts the 1 until 5 a.m. show. That's Eastern Time. The all-night radio show, basically. And he's a very bright guy. He has a tremendous knowledge of stuff, and above all, his approach is almost antiseptically neutral. He frames issues, he challenges you, he makes you produce your proof, but he's not antagonistic, and he's not in any way ideologically biased. He's sort of the model of the kind of news person that we need these days. Anyway, I looked him up, and I found a book that he wrote that came out in June called Mad as Hell. Now, you may remember Mad as Hell in the movie The Network. There's a character named Howard Beale, who is a network anchor, where he works at the TV station, and he just goes completely nuts because nobody's listening to the problems of the average person. And he opens up his window and sticks out his head and yells as loud as he can, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." And that became sort of an theme statement for the 1970s. And appropriately, Norrie's book is entitled Mad as Hell. And he writes in it, I'm reading it now, "I'm mad for many of the same reasons Howard Beale was. The ills of today's world that most people feel helpless about are not that much different than those of the fictional world that sent Howard Beale into his violent rage. What grates me most is that the people we rely upon, the ones we elect because they promise to deal with these problems, that we give the money and the power to, that we give the money and the power to, go to see that the problems are fixed, are often too lazy, corrupt, incompetent, or just don't care enough. In the film, Beale says that everybody knows that things are bad, that there's a depression, people are out of work or scared of losing their jobs, the air is unfit to breathe, the dollar's deflated, shopkeepers keep guns under the counter, and we sit all watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be." And this book is just enthralling. I stayed up late on Tuesday night to be on his show, and I stayed up late Wednesday night because I couldn't put his book down. It's called Mad as Hell, and it's really neat. You can get it through Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Now, this is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. Patriot Gold not only sells gold and silver, it also sells palladium. Palladium is a rare earth metal, very difficult to find the ore, and it is used extensively in all the catalytic converters in the United States. That's to say every car and every smokestack to minimize pollution. And it's also used in computers and batteries and iPads, iPhones, and all of that stuff. And there is a looming global shortage of it. The price of palladium has risen 35% year to date. That's not at a pace of 35. That is 35. If you put $10,000 into palladium 12 months ago, you now are the proud owner of $13,500 and compounding. And this is obviously an extraordinary investment opportunity. And experts are warning about a global shortage of palladium. And as the economies recover throughout the world, that shortage is likely to worsen. So be smart. Go to the Patriot Gold Group, patriotgoldgroup.com. Phone number is 800-476-5675.
I'll be posting it.
I shall be posting it. 800-476-5675. And ask about palladium. That is it might in fact be the best short-term investment that you could make. Now, I'm not an investment advisor. I'm not qualified to give the advice, and this is not advice. All I can tell you is that I spoke to my broker this morning and shifted some money into palladium. Now, United States weapons are... so we have anything?
Oh, we have a couple questions here.
Please.
Yeah, Joe Garcia from California, Los Angeles, wants to know, do you think Obama had the White House bugged?
Do I think Obama had the White House bugged? Yeah, I think that he did. I think that the White House is permanently bugged, at least the Oval is, so they can record meetings that are important. Of course, the president has to be able to turn that off, and he has to know it exists, and he has to be not dumb like Nixon and, in fact, turn it off. In fact, if you buy the Kennedy tapes, you can hear John Kennedy in his meetings, and it makes your heart throb, wishing you were back there. But I think it's too bad. Yep.
Oh, sorry. With the left so obviously following Hillary and Obama's mentor, Saul Alinsky's rules for the radicals, is there any way to derail or defeat it? Jack Tapper wants to know.
Hey, Jack. Yeah, there is. We can appoint the special prosecutor that I've been urging and begging for. The Achilles heel of these folks is that they can only speak through leaks, because otherwise they'll lose their jobs. And they can only speak by leaks to compliant and friendly media sources. So all you need to do is stop them from feeding, stop them from reproducing. And that's not that hard to do. And a special prosecutor looking into this can stop this. That's why I think Mueller fired Prozik, because he was leaking and because he knows how vulnerable that makes him. Now, the United States is shipping arms to the Lebanese army. And Lebanon is now under the control of Hezbollah, which is in turn under the control of Iraq. So politically, Lebanon is really part of, not Iraq, Iran. So Lebanon is functionally controlled by Iran, and Hezbollah is as well. Now, the United States used to focus, and still does from momentum, on arming the Lebanese military, because they used to be an independent force. They're not anymore. They're puppets now of Iran. But we haven't stopped supplying them with arms. And even when we did supply them with arms and felt that they were an ally that needed propping up, they were in fact run by Iran, and the arms all flowed through and went directly to Iran. So the United States ambassador to Iran, Ambassador... I erased the name, Richard something or other. No, I'm sorry, Elizabeth Richard, revealed that the Pentagon has done exactly that. In remarks delivered at the port of Beirut, she reviewed the material contents of a $100 million contribution that the U.S. is making to the Lebanese armed forces last month, which provided support to Hezbollah in a joint military operation in northeast Lebanon. Hailing the first 8 of a promised 32 M2A2 Bradley fighting vehicles that the U.S. will be delivering to the Lebanese armed forces. Richard reviewed the items the U.S. has delivered over the past 12 months. Along with heavier weapons, Richards revealed the list includes 4,000 M4 rifles, 320 night vision scopes and thermal sights, and 360 communications radios. So this is a gaping hole in our defense community. We are arming Hezbollah. We're arming Israel, but we're arming Hezbollah. It's fun to arm both sides of a war, isn't it? Good for defense contractors, bad for foreign policy. And thank goodness this Ambassador Richards had the integrity to out this, and I hope President Trump moves in and stops it. This is a gaping leak.
Dick, if Soros is declared enemy of the state, doesn't that mean he cannot fund campaigns or lobby in the U.S.? Kathy Armistead asks.
Kathy Armistead asks if Soros can be declared an enemy of the state and stopped from contributing to campaigns. There is no such thing as the enemy of the state. You can't punish someone for a status. You can only punish them for their actions. And Soros has done nothing which would block him from giving contributions to whoever he likes. A good idea, but we can't do it. Now, Sarah Palin is currently involved in an intense, in-your-face litigation with the New York Times, a libel litigation, and it's about time, and it's worth following. When Gabrielle Giffords, the congresswoman from Arizona, was shot and almost killed, prior to that, Palin had published, her PAC had published, a piece of literature, a mailing, that had a photo of Gifford's district with a target on it, like a rifle scope target. And the New York Times wrote that this was an incitement to violence, and that that the New York Times shared in the blame for the attempted assassination, because Palin shared the blame because she was encouraging people to take action against Gabrielle Giffords. The New York Times, Palin then sued the New York Times over this July 14th editorial, and he said the editorial said the link between Palin's literature and the shooting to incitement was clear, between a graphic produced by Palin's PAC and the murderous rampage of Jared Loudner in the attack in Phoenix. Palin sued, saying the Times had defamed her and made her a stylized target as a result of the editorial in the New York Times. Now, the Times admitted that it was wrong. It admitted that it had no factual basis for it. Bennett, the head of the Times editorial board, testified yesterday in court that he became extremely concerned about the content of the editorial late on the night of June 14th after the shooting, after seeing criticisms of it on social media, and spent the early hours of June 15th frantically attempting to have his team determine whether a connection existed between the Palin PAC and the shooter's motives. The Times apologized and placed multiple corrections on the piece, proclaiming it had no connection was found between the shooting and the graphic. But because Palin is a public figure, you not only have to prove that it defamed her and that it wasn't true, but that the Times had a reckless or malicious disregard for the truth and for the facts, which is a high bar to hurdle. But it's very interesting to see the New York Times caught on the hook for one of these left-wing editorials and biased news coverage that we've all been lamenting to ourselves as we read the articles. This newspaper has completely gone from being the most prestigious in the world to being a virtual propaganda sheet for the left wing of the Democratic Party. And it's a damn shame, and it epitomizes the horrible drift of the news media. Now, Iran has just rejected U.S. requests to inspect its sites, its military installations, to look for evidence of violation of the Iran deal. The Iranian senior advisor to Khomeini said, "The Americans will never be permitted to inspect our military sites. Ridiculous dream that will never come true." And Brigadier General Hossein Salami underlined that Iran will not allow any foreign states, specifically the U.S., to visit the country's military centers. Both the great Iranian nation and the U.S. and the world should know that if there's only one demand in the whole world which will be rejected, and if there's only wish that will be taken to the grave, it is the American demand to visit our military centers. Now, that's all really nice, but condition one of the deal's approval was that the president has to certify that Iran is transparently, verifiably, and fully implementing the agreement, including all related technical or additional agreements. And those include the inspection rights. So Iran is now in violation, blatantly, flagrantly, and openly of the Iran nuclear deal. And in a few weeks, Trump is going to have to make his 90-day certification that Iran is complying with the deal for us to continue to honor it. Otherwise, sanctions, quote, snap back into place, the words of Obama and Hillary. And they may have to do some snapping now, because Iran has publicly defied him by announcing that they're not going to permit access to their military sites. We can go anyplace else. We can visit their cement factories, their Coca-Cola plants. We can visit their rug weavers. We can visit all of the many mosques and tourist sites in Iran, but not their military bases. Why would we want to go there when we're investigating military uses of nuclear energy? Why would we want to visit the military sites? It makes no sense. Now, there is a prediction out from, according to the Telegraph, the London newspaper, but by the bank UBS, that predicts that the total cost of electronic vehicle ownership can reach parity with combustion engines by 2018. In other words, if you include the maintenance, the gas, the mileage, and the purchase price, electrical vehicles are not going to be more expensive than regular internal combustion engines. This will create an inflection point for global demand. We raise our 2025 forecast for electrical vehicle sales by 50% to 14.2 million, and predict that by 2025, 14% of global car sales will be electric vehicles. Now that is incredible. Volvo, by the way, has announced that it will stop making petroleum-fueled cars in 2019, and Porsche said that half of its new vehicles will be electric by 2013. This is really the beginning of this incredible revolution that will soon be followed by self-driving cars. And there is no necessity for aggressive action on climate change or global warming, even if you believe it's going to happen, and is happening, because market forces are forcing that change. Given the alternative of electric fuel or a combustion engine, people are voting with their feet for electric vehicles. And that demand is so strong, and the price and the production demands are so extensive that it really is the wave of the future. And once again, the central planners have had themselves being overtaken by the marketplace. And that, I think, is key. Yes.
Dick, what do you think of Troy Gowdy being President of the United States? And I hope I can pronounce her name.
Trey.
Oh, she wrote Troy. I'm sorry, Trey. Evelyn Delpret-Solon.
Evelyn Delpret-Solon.
Yes.
You were worried about Trey.
I know.
Asked if Trey Gowdy will ever be president. Well, I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed in Trey Gowdy because he headed that Benghazi committee, and Hillary tied him up in knots over leaks, over claiming that that she had done her own investigation and hadn't found anything. And I think that Trey Gowdy did not do the job that that I had hoped that he would do. I'm going to have some information about Benghazi in the next few days that may blow this whole thing wide open, but that's coming soon.
Great question from Frank Beerfan. What is your playbook for going after the left and helping Trump get out of his own way? Frank Beerfan.
What's my playbook for Trump going ahead? I think that Trump first should continue to focus on the economy. I meant to say when I was talking about Steve Bannon that Bannon made a very good point in this interview he had with the liberal publication. He said that the Democrats are going so far over to the left. This is left in my bands. I know in reverse it is. So far over to the left and focusing on cultural issues, this phony thing about the statues and the monuments. And they're so immersed in that they're losing sight of the economy as an issue. And they're basically ceding it to Trump. And even in polls that show Trump's job approval at minus 10% or something, no matter how biased they are, they concede that on the economy, Trump's ratings are pretty good. And it is the whole thesis of Bannon's approach, his so-called economic nationalism, that the economy will determine how these folks end up voting. And he said, let them go overboard, let them go crazy about Robert E. Lee on a horse in a statue. Well, we'll talk about the jobs numbers in the economy and the recovery that this country is clearly going through. And we'll beat the stuffings out of them time after time. And I think Bannon has a very good point.
Dick, why do you think that no special prosecutor has been appointed? Naomi Corbett-Kalsoff asks.
Naomi Corbett-Kalsoff asks, why hasn't a prosecutor been appointed yet? Well, I just made the proposal a week or two ago, and my book advocating it just came out 2 or 3 days ago. And it's a new idea, and we need to let it mature, let it be digested by the administration, and then hopefully we can get it done. I want to announce the contest winners from yesterday. The question was, who was the only third-party candidate to get more votes than one of the major candidates in a presidential election? And Dennis Connolly said Theodore Roosevelt, and that is the right answer. Now, I just read here that a woman named Gail Maxey said John C. Breckinridge. Well, that is a close question. Breckinridge was the vice president under James Buchanan, the president right before Lincoln. And when the Democratic Party got together to designate a candidate, they chose Stephen Douglas, Lincoln's old opponent from Illinois, and Breckinridge was defeated. So the Southern delegates to the Democratic Convention walked out of the convention because Douglas had opposed slavery and nominated Breckinridge as their candidate, as their third-party candidate. And he did receive more votes. I don't know about popular votes, more electoral votes. I'm not sure about that. I need to look it up. Than Stephen Douglas did. Breckinridge carried the entire South, and Douglas carried only a few border states. So I got to look that up. You may be right. In any case, I'll send you a book because you might well be right. But I'm also sending one to Dennis Connolly, who said Theodore Roosevelt. That was what I thought was the correct answer. In 1912, Theodore Roosevelt had served as president from McKinley's assassination in 1901 to 1904, re-elected till 1908. Roosevelt was McKinley's vice president. And he was incredible. He totally changed the nature of American politics. He came down fiercely against the monopolies and the trusts. He reformed every aspect and created new aspects of federal regulation, of meat packing and of health and safety and of all kinds of things. A tremendously important president, of course, a Republican. And he said he wasn't going to run for a third term in 2008, and everybody would have supported him. He would have won easily. And William Howard Taft, his close associate, became the presidential nominee in 2008 and won easily. And in 1912, he was up for re-election. But he and Roosevelt had a falling out. It was a great relationship, but they came to dislike each other. At least Taft disliked Roosevelt. And Roosevelt criticized Taft for being lackluster in pursuing his agenda, particularly for firing a guy named Gifford Pinchot, who was Roosevelt's Secretary of the Interior and helped found the National Park System. And he said that Taft was not sufficiently focused on conservation. And it was one of the great rivalries. And Taft and Roosevelt fought for the Republican nomination for president in 2012. And they entered all the primaries. And Roosevelt beat Taft in every single one of them by large margins. But the Republican leaders wanted Taft because they were uncomfortable because Roosevelt wanted to end corruption and was breaking up the elites that ran the party, a real Donald Trump kind of figure. And so Roosevelt walked out of the convention and set up a new third party called the Bull Moose Party. And he ran for president on that party. And he moved much further to the left than he had been when he was president, even in his second term. He advocated many of the fundamental reforms that came to characterize the New Deal: regulation of securities, Social Security, wages and hours legislation, minimum wages, oversight of Wall Street, Securities and Exchange Commission, a very far-reaching agenda. And he was defeated, but he finished second. The Democratic candidate was Woodrow Wilson, and Wilson finished first. I don't know with how many votes, but I think it was about 14 or 15 million. Roosevelt was second with about 9, and Taft was third with about 6. And coming in last was Eugene Victor Debs, the candidate of the Socialist Party, with 1 million. So the left-wing candidates, everybody but Taft, got about 80% of the vote. And Wilson was elected because of the split between Taft and Roosevelt, ending the Republican domination that had more or less been running things since the Civil War. By the way, when Roosevelt was running, an assassin fired a bullet at him and hit him in the chest. And the bullet buried in his body. But he didn't stop. He didn't falter. He continued his hour-long speech. And at the end of the speech, he said, "By the way, some of you may have noticed that I was shot a little while ago, but it takes more than a bullet to stop a bull moose." And that became really a legendary comment and part of his going down in history. Theodore Roosevelt would have won the Republican nomination for president in 1920, after Wilson served 2 terms and after World War I. But he died in 1919 and never got to be the first man to break the 3-term limit. That had to be left to his cousin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who did. So thanks very much for watching. Now, we are about to have, I think I've told you, this program codified into a TV show, the beginning of Facebook becoming a TV network. And it's be called Deep Six, the Deep State, and it'll be listed in the video list that they're going to put out that you're going to soon have on your Facebook page. There's an initial launch next week for 1% of the country, of the world, and there's another that will follow for everybody a few weeks later. And it's really exciting. And it'll be a program just like this. Unfortunately for you, and fortunately for me, there'll be ads in it. But fortunately, the ads will never be more than 15 seconds. And I won't stack one after the other. So I hope you stay with me on that. And I hope that you buy Rogue Spooks, The Intelligence War on Donald Trump. You're asking why we don't have a special prosecutor, why this stuff is not as widely spread as it should be. And that's because this book is just starting out. It's number 200 or something on Amazon, which isn't bad in the 3rd day publication. But I want to really blow it out. So please buy a copy of the book. I got to use it to get this to the attention of Trump and his key people so they can follow the game plan outlined in here. That's how I got the game plan to get Trump elected out there. We wrote a book called Armageddon, How Trump Can Beat Hillary. And eventually it got to everybody's desk in the Trump campaign and was their Bible throughout the race. I want this to get to everybody in the White House and for this to become their Bible. And you can help put it there by buying a copy and contributing to its sales.
And if anyone wants an opportunity to win a free signed book, at the end of this broadcast, I'll be posting the contest question, which you all have a chance to answer, and we'll announce the winner tomorrow.
Thank you.